How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you again.
You too.
I feel like we got to know each other. I guess it was in November when we were both helping a campaign for Covenant House, which I know you also value and do a lot of support of.
Yeah.
So thank you for helping us with our campaign and that. But we're not here to talk about Covenant House this time. So at the time when we had that campaign, you were living in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall, you were one of only 3 pediatric heart surgeons performing transplants. Is that accurate? In the state?
Slightly. That's what the headlines say. I'm really a heart transplant cardiologist, so I do everything except the actual surgery.
Okay.
So I'm Jay Kleinmahon. I'm a father of 2 kids, and a husband of my husband Tom. I'm originally from Westchester, New York, and Tom is originally from Michigan. We met in New Orleans when he was down there working for Shell, and I was at Tulane Medical School. Since then, we've been in New Orleans. Then we went to Denver for my training, and then in 2018 we came back to New Orleans because we felt like it was the place where we would plant our roots and raise our children. We have 2 children. Isabel just turned 7 yesterday, and Connor is 4. But as you mentioned, it's been harder and harder to live in Louisiana and states like it.
So just so we get a sense, so how long ago were you in med school? I mean, you look like you just graduated from medical school to me.
So I went to med school 2007. I graduated 2011. Did my residency in New Orleans, and then we were gone from 2014 to 2018. So total, I think that I was in New Orleans for 12 years, and Tom was there for about 16.
Okay, so certainly long enough to build roots and, like you said, choose it as your home. So talk to us about what happened with the anti-LGBTQ legislation that you started seeing across your state. Do you want to talk about that?
Mm-hmm. So as most people on here know, there's been a litany of laws that have been both proposed and passed against LGBTQ people. And in Louisiana, we were a little bit later, but we're really, unfortunately, no different. Yeah. So there are 3 laws that were proposed. There is a Don't Say Gay bill that would not allow teachers or anybody in the school to talk about same-sex relationships or anything like that. It would also prevent kids who are being bullied, let's say because they had gay parents, from teachers stepping in and making a learning lesson out of it. There was a given name bill that was targeting the trans community, not allowing preferred pronouns or preferred names. And then there was a ban on gender affirming care. All 3 of those bills in Louisiana passed. Right now we have a Democratic-like governor. He vetoed all 3 bills. They held a special veto override session, and they overrode the veto on the gender affirming care. Now, people say to me, well, but the other laws didn't go into effect, so how does that really affect you? And the way I think of it is we are choosing to live in Louisiana, and we chose to go there really because I wanted the kids in Louisiana to have the same health care as anybody else in the world. And we tried our best. We wrote letters, we made calls, we voted in every election. And when we saw what was going on in the legislature, we looked at each other and said, why would we want to stay in a state that is trying to make laws against our family, against our friends, and against our supporters? So that's what really was the deciding factor of us leaving.
Well, so one thing I think that's important to mention is you weren't just sort of a casual bystander of what was going on. You start to allude to some of the many ways in which you and your family were activists and trying to prevent this legislation from even coming up for votes. And I saw, your very moving posts on Instagram in which you said goodbye to New Orleans, and you talked about a particular night that really seemed to clench your feelings. You want to share about that?
Sure. When we were watching the debate in the Senate Education Committee on the Don't Say Gay bill, there was about 20 minutes of discussion of people for the bill. And then there was about an hour and 45 minutes of discussion of people against the bill. And these were people of the LGBTQ community, but these were also pastors and teachers and medical professionals, kind of all walks of life, saying these bills are harmful. And the Republican part of the committee just walked out during that discussion. They previously agreed to work through lunch, and then people started speaking out against the bill, and they just left. And that's when we turned to each other and said, these people just don't care, and they don't care about our family. And we've poured our heart into Louisiana, our hearts into New Orleans. It doesn't feel like we're getting anything back.
Yeah, so it's got to be a very tough realization to come to. Do you know of other families that have moved from either Louisiana or other states?
Oh, I sure do. Since this has all gone public, and our move was not meant to be public, I just wrote an Instagram post telling our friends and family and followers that we're leaving, and it just happened to be picked up by a CBS News reporter that tweeted it and got 4 million views, and the rest is history. But since then, I've probably had 100 people reach out to me, either say that they've moved, a lot of them to Canada. I've been welcomed to all parts of Canada that I didn't even know existed, all parts of the United States. And there are also people who are thinking about moving, but don't have the same choices as we had, and don't have the ability to move.
Right, for sure. But even so, for those who do make the move, so you guys did move. Do you want to talk about where you're living now?
Yeah, and I'll kind of talk about the other factors in the decision, and because I've gotten all the criticism from moving, and one of the things that I've been criticized for is saying, well, you just moved because you were offered a better job in New York, and the truth is I just got really lucky, and it was really hard for us to decide to move because, as you mentioned, I'm one of what was one of 3 pediatric heart transplant cardiologists in the state. I was also one of 2 pediatric pulmonary hypertension doctors in the entire state, and the other physician actually also just left. So now there are 0.
Wow.
So I don't take I didn't take this move lightly. We really thought about it, and because I went into medicine to develop relationships with people and to support patients through the hardest time. And for the last 5 years, I've been building these relationships, and to have to tell them that I'm leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But our kids come first, our family comes first, and there are people on Long Island who don't have as close access to heart transplant as well. There's no transplant program on Long Island, so we moved to Long Island, where I will be starting at Cohen Children's Medical Center and starting a heart transplant program.
Wow, that's excellent. You're sort of close to where you grew up.
Yes. So there is certainly more than one benefit. My parents now live on Long Island. My brothers and their families live in the greater Boston area.
Oh, okay. That's where I am. So they must all be happy, of course.
Yes.
All right. So, as you're looking back on things now, would you have done anything differently? Do you alternative course of action?
Looking back and seeing how happy we are here, I would have said we should have moved sooner. But like I said, we moved back to Louisiana for a reason.
Yeah.
And we could have gone other places, but we have this love for New Orleans. New Orleans is an incredible city. Sometimes it's really difficult to live, but we knew all its blemishes moving back. And so I'm not sure we would do anything differently. I certainly would have tried to be even more vocal on the kind of legislature side of things. But in reality, I was also running a heart transplant program, and my husband is a full-time chemical engineer. So we did what we felt like we could with the resources that we had.
Who knows? Maybe you've got a future career, though, after you've been done saving lives as a politician.
Well, certainly, I've been in contact with the Human Rights Campaign on continuing advocacy work, because I do feel it's important, and it's sad that the biggest impact that we've made is by us moving, and that's what's drawn all the attention. But I feel it's important for us to continue this journey and continue to stand up for people who are unable to move, or are not in or are making the decision, and try to, from afar, also impact the course of these dangerous laws that are. I laugh because they say they're protecting children, when for my job I actually protect children.
Yeah. I have a question. What advice do you have then to help others who are inspired by you and want to get involved and do what they can to help out? What are some of the easiest ways to get started?
Certainly contacting your local legislatures. If you have enough people that care what their constituents think, voting is perhaps one of the greatest powers that we have. Working with organizations that you may be a part of or work for. A lot of, so my hospital in New Orleans, and my husband's company, they both have government relations departments that try to lobby against these bills as well. And I think the more we can get more entities against these bills, and really stamping out the misinformation about them, telling my story and why we were leaving to my patients was probably one of the more powerful things I did, because a lot of these people actually probably were for these bills until they found out how it affected me as someone who they trusted as their child's doctor, and now how it affects them, that their child no longer, I'm not going to say doesn't have me as a doctor, because there are other doctors, wonderful doctors out there, but certainly have had to change course with their medical care.
Absolutely. You know, it scares me because it sounds like such a step backward. My husband is Dutch and I'm American, and we've been together for 30 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But, you know, for the first 20 years of our relationship, he had no legal status here. He came as a tourist. And after we became dads, he was told that he could no longer stay here. And so we actually moved to Canada, which recognized our relationships. And even my parents, like, it wasn't until we literally drove across the border and we said, okay, we're at our new home now, that people really understood how important marriage equality was, because I couldn't marry him. I couldn't sponsor him for a green card. So we literally took a 3-month-old baby and a 2-year-old puppy and moved to Canada because we didn't have access to the same laws that everyone and benefits that everyone else did. So you're right. It's just by sharing your truth and your story is what helps change a lot of hearts and minds of people that otherwise would have had no idea, and how this stuff really impacts our lives. So thank you so much for being visible. I say it to everyone who helps give us visibility and just as fighting for the cause. So thank you. It's great talking to you. I wish you and your family all the best in New York. You guys go to Fire Island at all this summer? Have you been there?
But we haven't. I've actually never been there.
What?
Certainly would be something we'd love to do. We're close to it now.
Yes, you
Yeah.
are. We went there for 11 summers, and then the 11th one was when Levi was born, and we actually took him there that summer. And back then, I don't think we saw any other kids, but I bet you if you go today, there'll be a lot of families there as well. So,
Or we could leave the kids with my parents.
all right, there you go. Well, if you go, you have to go into the pantry and tell the managers in the back that Brian and Bert say hi.
All right, will do.
All right, great to see you. Thanks so much for chatting. Again, all the best to you. And those of you who are watching, if you're inspired to help out and help get involved, you heard what Dr. Jake said. Easiest things just to call your legislators, and find out how you can support equality in all shapes and sizes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.